Thank you, Janine, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for joining us and creating time so that we go through the presentation together. Let me minimize this. My name is Murigi Mwangi. I'm an environmental and social safeguard specialist. I've been in the sector for 14 years now, mainly on the side of renewable energy, transmission line projects, and forest plantations, and most recently, but it's not picking up so well, the climate, the carbon credit market. So I'm also a member of IACD. I joined in 2021 towards the end, okay, not the end, but somewhere within the COVID period. And I've been a member, but actively I'm now starting to share what I can with the members so that we can also build knowledge together. And yes, so welcome. So the topic for discussion today is on mainstreaming environmental and social framework in community projects. So let me first contextualize what we mean by community projects here. So you find that in national and regional interests, you'll find that you'll get these community projects coming up in different places. They may be projects that are related to the energy sector. They may be projects that are related to water. Others may be related to the transport industry. But as small as they are or as big as they are, cumulatively they contribute to the national or regional interest. So these projects, the immediate impacts that are felt are usually by the host communities, the communities that provide land for these projects to take place, or in one way or another are going to be affected by either the policies, so that these projects can take place. And these impacts, they will touch on land, they will touch on the livelihoods of the people, they will touch on the culture and the socioeconomic fabric, and also to the environment, that is the biodiversity and the ecosystem. So when you're looking at these projects, their risks are way greater if you don't integrate ESF to them. So this is the environmental and social framework. So by us integrating the ESF, it ensures that there is inclusivity for these projects. These projects are done in a fair way, and they are sustainable. The outcomes are sustainable. So what is ESF? So ESF, it's a risk management framework whose main aim is to avoid, and where it's not entirely possible to avoid, is to minimize the adverse effects of the environmental and social impacts. So this the ESF can also be used to identify and maximize on the positive outcomes with such activities like local recruitment, because it's one among the many things that are usually encouraged when projects are being implemented, where they will do local recruitment, ensure they enhance the local economy through certain things, also ensure that they help the community with skills from vocational training, and also enhance their livelihoods. So ESF, we could also say they are a set of policy and standards and procedures that guide on how these projects should be planned, around how they should be planned. They should be implemented to ensure that they protect, they safeguard the people, the livelihoods, the culture, and the environment. So the purpose mainly is usually to balance the development objectives and to safeguard the environmental and social to safeguard the environment and the social and the social side of it. So ESFs can be used by governments and can also be used by the development financiers. We call them the DFIs. And in these ESFs, they usually have the different standards that they look at. So probably if the project is going to affect on things like the culture, it will have a standard on culture. So if it's going to affect land, maybe there will be involuntary resettlement. There's going to be an ESS on, there's going to be a standard on land. If there's going to be on the environmental and social side of it, there's going to be a standard that talks about ESIA. There's going to be a standard that talks about the health and safety of the community and all that. So from the previous slide, we can get that the key principles of the ESF are: one, do no harm. Ensure that you protect the people and the environment. The second one is participation and inclusion. Ensure that these communities are being involved to come up with the decisions that you want to implement in their areas, in their communities. Third one is accountability, clear responsibilities and transparent reporting. This is always advocated for. It has to be documented and you have to demonstrate, you have to show that you've done all this, even in reporting, even when you're doing stakeholder engagement, all that you have to demonstrate. Then number 4 is equity. Most of the projects that are implemented, and we'll get to that much later when we are looking at the comparison, at the national level and at the international level, most at the national level will want to do a project at a least cost plan. So, and at a least cost plan, you will not have things like follow-up to ensure that these vulnerable groups are okay. You'll just want to do things at the least cost so that you are done with it and you move forward. But when you talk about the ESFs, the international ESFs, they will want you to pay special attention to SIGs. These are the special interest and the vulnerable groups. And then there's application of good international industry practice in the design, construction, and operation of the project. I hope I'm not so fast. If I am, someone can just interject. So,
excuse me, Murigi, can you just clear up what is the SIG? So special and vulnerable group? No, sorry.
Yes, this one here, sorry, yeah. And I must apologize, Janine also mentioned about all the acronyms and the abbreviations. So these are the special interest groups and the vulnerable groups.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So when we talk about mainstreaming ESF, what do we really mean by that? What are we trying to achieve when we say that? So the first one is to ensure that we reduce the risks, conflicts, and delays. This is something that has made so many projects delay. And with the delay, they end up accruing more debt if it was a loan that they were given. And you'll find it's mostly because of simple things, simple like just stakeholder engagement, that they never agreed on something, or maybe the grievance response mechanism is not working. Just small issues that once you mainstream, because mainstreaming usually gives guidance. It lays out steps on how things should be done. So by us mainstreaming, we can help in reducing the risks and delays for these projects. So we can ensure that these special interest groups will get a fair compensation and will be included in the whole process. Projects avoid stoppages from grievances, from protests, from litigations. So by us mainstreaming, we can ensure that we these projects are sustainable. These community projects can be enjoyed much longer. They can have a good basis on them. So for ESFs, they treat these people who are affected by the project as part of the development and not displacement. I can help maybe bring this point to good context by giving this example of a project. If you have a road project that's passing through a community and you have 2 or 3 members that are going to be affected, when you use the ESF, it integrates these people as part of the project. Therefore, even during the project design, you will find that things like resettlement action plan, livelihood restoration is done, and the whole budget is compiled after all these activities have been included in them. Therefore, they are treated as part of the development and not as just people whom you will just chase away and tell, go, move out of here. So by mainstreaming ESF, we can help bring that sanity, ensure that all that is done within that context. So ESF also ensures communities receive skills. This is part of capacity building. When you're talking to these community members, you're coming up with agreements on maybe FP, that is the free prior informed consent, or grievance redress mechanism, or livelihood restoration and community development plans. All these, it's an inclusive process where you agree on some of these trainings that people will want to get, and all that is documented down. And during the implementation of the project, these things are availed to the communities. So another reason why we mainstream is to ensure we protect the environment and the cultural values. ESF, they safeguard all these things that are associated with communities and historical. They will have some historical attachment to them. So when it comes to things like land, oh, sorry, I thought I saw someone draw something on the screen. Yeah, so when it comes to protecting the environment and the culture, ESF will ensure that they do that. And as I had mentioned when I started, there are usually standards that are related to each and every aspect of this. So if it's culture, you must look at culture differently. You must look at IP. These are the indigenous persons, and we know you have to do the free prior informed consent. They have to acknowledge, they have to let you continue with your project, because they depend on their livelihoods depend on the places where those projects usually are going to be done. So and the third and the fourth one here, it enhances the community ownership and acceptance. Through the meaningful consultation, participation, and transparency, communities will help shape the decisions of these projects. Sorry about that. So when we go to the policy and institutional context, when I introduce the community projects, I mentioned these projects may be on like the renewable energy sector, they may be on conservation, and the fact that they are on those, they'll be on those different sectors, it means there will be some trigger that will happen in terms of land acquisition, or in terms of resettlement, or environmental risks. So these are things that are usually assessed to see what aspect will be impacted and what will be the magnitude of this impact. So while doing these assessments, there are usually frameworks at both the national and international level. So for the national level, there are laws that are set by the land. Those will be like the constitutions. Under the constitution, there'll be the land acts. There'll be the compensation guidelines, which are referred to mostly as the resettlement framework policies. And these ones will guide on how procedures are to be followed at the national level. But then when we talk about ESF at the international level, these are frameworks that they are usually higher of any land. Whether it's Europe, whether it's Africa, it's usually higher because the benchmark they set, you have to ensure that you meet those standards. And most of these projects, before they start, they sign something called a CP, a condition precedent, where they tell you that if you want us to give you amount X, you have to do activity A and B. And if we are satisfied with you doing activity A and B, we are going to give you amount X. So this is where now the international safeguards, the ESF, comes in. When we look at the national ESF, as I had mentioned, most of them will want to work with the least cost plan in mind. So they don't want to use a lot of money. They want to use less money and maximize on what they have. So they will not look at several aspects of the community, like livelihood restoration and some of the social systems. And due to this, many project affected persons usually struggle to recover their lives after these projects are implemented. You'll find a project is implemented today. Someone is given amount X. Probably in their life, this is the most amount of money they've seen at once at that particular time. But no financial literacy is given to them. They are not taught about ensuring that they replace whatever was removed because of the project. If it's a house, they're supposed to ensure that they rebuild that house, because failure to do that, they are not only inconveniencing them, but there are also other people in that household, like the children, like the spouse, who will also end up suffering. But then when we come to the international standards, there is emphasis on livelihood restoration. So this is not only paying these people and telling them to move, but you are there throughout the whole process. You will want to check aspects of their life through a socioeconomic survey. You'll want to ask them how much money they make. If they're farming, how many bags of maybe maize or millet or beans they get at a particular season. And all this is to try to ensure that you have a baseline such that later, when you're doing the livelihood restoration and you're doing the monitoring later, you will find out whether this project has made these people better or worse, or they are just there where you found them. And this helps in ensuring that you give some additional assistance to them. Remember, I mentioned ESF at the international level is usually higher than the local standard, because it not only gives you like the compensation, what you're entitled to, whether it's in cash or in kind, but it also ensures that you get additional assistance, like transitional support. It could be you are elderly and you are not able to move on time. So there will be provisions done, maybe hiring of young people, getting you a truck to move and ensure that you move in peace, at least you're okay. So mainstreaming ESF bridges the gap by creating a safeguard system that ensures that people not only receive the compensation, but also these people have a pathway to restore and improve their living standards. Thank you. So when we go to the next slide, I would like to show some differences. Sorry, I'm trying to remove, there you go. So I'd like to show some differences of the ESFs at the national level and at the international standards. So when it comes to like the first aspect on things like land and assets, in many countries, they follow what the Land Act says. In some countries where we've done projects, we've found that the national laws says that only developments on land are compensated, and the land itself is not compensated because the caretaker is the state government. So you are only paid for the developments, and then you are shown somewhere else where you will go. But even where you are shown that you will go, probably it's maybe 50 or 100 kilometers away from where you've already built your life, and you've stayed there for maybe close to even 40 years, 50 years, and then someone just comes and tells you, hey, we are paying you and you're leaving. We are paying you for structures only and you're leaving. So wherever you go, we don't care. We don't want to know what you will do with your life when you go. But now, when it comes to the international standards, first, what we do is we ensure that all the project affected persons are compensated, are the ones who are compensated directly. Maybe here I can also mention, and under the national frameworks, when you have a community that stays in a place and land is not fully adjudicated, in some jurisdictions, the caretaker of that land is not the person who's staying there. It's usually paid to like a county government. It's like a state government. So it means you will have different people that you are paying at this level. You will pay, example, if it's my house, you will pay me for my assets, for land. You'll pay me for my structure and for crops. But when it comes to land, you will not pay me for land because it's not mine. It is owned by the state government or the county government. So that's usually at the national framework, and that's what happens. So you'll find most projects, when they really want to do something in that area, they will go to the international standards way, where they will assess the land. After they assess the land, they can help now in ensuring that adjudication process, the process of ensuring that the land moves from being owned by maybe the county or the state, it goes down now to the private owner, the individual owner, so that they are paid. So when you use ESF, you cannot afford to do that. You cannot afford to pay someone and you're not able to trace where that money went, and that money will not go to the rightful person. So going the international, the ESF way ensures that you pay them at a full replacement cost. And we will also get to that example much later in the slides, where you will see the differences. Under the national framework, the payment is done under the market value, and international frameworks is usually FRC, full replacement cost. It doesn't matter when you built your house, whether it's 30 years ago or 50 years ago, but the fact that I want to move you today, I have to pay you using today's rates, today's prevailing rates. And that is usually accounted for also when you're looking at the transactional fees, because when you're telling me to go buy land somewhere else, there will be land rates that I will have to pay. There will be lawyers that I will have to pay for transfer of title deeds. All those costs are usually factored in under and are usually under the international standards. So when we come to depreciation, what I mentioned in regards to full replacement cost, under the national level, anyone who has a house and built it 20, 30 years ago, they're usually paid at that market price because that is the value of that structure as it is. But then when you want them to move and you're using the frameworks, the ESF, the international framework, you'll have to pay them at full replacement cost. So even if a house had a hole on the roof, you will pay as if that iron sheet was okay. It didn't have a hole on the roof. So when it comes to resettlement, national frameworks, most of them, they usually advocate for cash payments. They don't want this issue of dragging each other. Oh, because this money is not enough, can you build for me a house that is a replica of this? Most national frameworks will not want that. And so their focus is usually on cash payments. But when you come to the international frameworks, they will tell you, they will give you two options. And this is usually well documented even in the information leaflet when you start, that is given to the project affected persons when you start engaging with them. So it will be written in bold, you're going to get paid in cash or in kind. This is to say that if you see that the amount is not sufficient, Tell them you want a house that is a replica of what you had. And this is something they have to abide by, because as I had mentioned, for these projects to be given amount X, they have to ensure that they do condition A and they meet condition B. When it comes to livelihood restoration, most of these national frameworks will not have this aspect to it. But for the ESF, they will have this aspect, the livelihood restoration, and they will also have the community development plan. And this is entirely to ensure that the community or the person who's affected, they go back to where they were before the project starts, or they are better. When it comes to people without formal property rights, I think I mentioned this example of someone who owns a structure, but they don't have the rights to the land. For national frameworks, most of them are regarded as quotas, and they will be chased away even without any compensation. It doesn't matter how you got there, but you will be chased away. When the government says we are coming, and most of the time they'll give you a notice like 1 year, and then it seems like you will forget. And then when you wake up one day, 1 year later, you just see a bulldozer outside. But for the international frameworks, even if you're not entitled to that land, at least you'll be given some sort of support, because you've been there, and if it wasn't for this project, you will have continued staying in that project. But you see, already now you are vulnerable, and you have to be identified, and you have to be included as part of those land users. As much as you will not be paid for the value of the land, at least you'll be paid for the structures that are there, because it was your sweat that you used to build those structures. So this continued. So in terms of consultations, the national frameworks, and most of them you'll hear, they'll tell you, oh, there is no budget for us to keep on doing these engagements. So most of the time it's one-off, or it's even not them coming to tell you. Maybe they will trickle down the information, maybe to the local administration, who maybe will be the chiefs. And then the chiefs will be told, hey, tell those people who are selling at the market or somewhere there that they need to move, or something like that. But for the international ESF, there has to be demonstrable, continuous, inclusive participation that shows you engaged these people. And not only showing that you engage them, you have to show those records, participatory records, where someone said I attended, they wrote their name down. And this has to be, and it doesn't have to be only verbal, but it has to be on paper, so that you can use it as a reference. And even when it comes to like the indigenous persons, there are so many cases of indigenous persons who are just chased away from where they've historically called home, and nothing has been done to them. Maybe they've been chased away, and then maybe like a forest plantation has come up. So no free, prior informed consent was sought, and these communities are left miserable, most of them. And you find that it's one thing that they're always trying to fight for it, because even some of them don't even have identification. They are not recognized by their own governments as vulnerable people. And this usually affects. But for international ESF, you have to demonstrate that you talked to them and they gave you that consent to do whatever you want to do in their land. So when it comes to environment, most of the national frameworks will want to adhere to the national laws only, and they will not look at broader biodiversity impacts that these projects will have to the broader community. So in one example, for some of these projects that we do, we usually have the 1 year round bird survey, where we have people, ornithologists, who sit at vantage points and record the migratory species of birds that they see, or local species of birds. And then this data, whatever they record, including the flight paths, is usually incorporated into the project model, and impacts, the areas where impacts can be felt are usually avoided, are mitigated. So this is where we were saying ESF not only looks at issues that are affecting the people, but it will also look at the environment and ways of how they can reduce those risks by mitigating them. So when it comes to, special interest groups, these are the vulnerable people. Under the national level, they are not given any special attention. But when you come to ESF, there will be focus on these groups, because most of these GBV issues, they will always start when you are not even paying attention to these groups. And in some of these communities, the youth are more than the elderly, and you'll also find there are people who are sickly in community and they need assistance. They are also children, and you also need to factor all these. In one project that we were doing, I remember one of the comments we got from the NGOs was that our main focus here is not even looking at what benefits the people in the community will get, but as we are here to safeguard the kids. These kids are using these access roads every day to go to school. And when you start building this, when you start putting up this project here and you start digging holes, and children are playful along the way, then this eventually will have an impact. If it's not well addressed, it can be a very big risk, where children can hurt themselves when they are walking to school. So these are some of the things that are usually advocated for. There was even an instance back here in Kenya where there were cows. There was the utility, one of the utility company in Kenya, they were digging holes to put up the pylons. But in one place they didn't put a ribbon, and then one herder was herding around the area, and his cows fell into one of the holes that had been dug for the pylons. You see, now that becomes an issue, and we say DSF tries to ensure that the risk is mitigated early. Risk of delays, that on its own is a cause for delay of the project. So ESF tries to talk about all that and ensure that it mitigates. So when it comes to cultural heritage, I think I mentioned this when I was talking about the indigenous persons, ensuring that their historical lands, places of worship, all this is done, is assessed to ensure that the project moves on smoothly. So another aspect is grievance redress mechanism. Under the national frameworks, there is usually no structured GRM level for most of them. I've seen some are there, but some are not. And due to this, most of these issues that come up that are related maybe to land, to maybe compensation of crops, to maybe compensation of structures, usually end up in court. And when and when it goes to court, it's not only even the risk of delay, but it also the risk of this project affected person going to suffer more, because they'll have now to incur costs for lawyer, costs for all those processes. And at the first point, they didn't even have this money. This money is what they're expecting you to pay them so that they can try and get some legal assistance. But you see, for ESF, the international ESF, we usually look at structured multi-tier GRM levels. So basically, if you have an issue, instead of escalating it all the way to the courts, it will have a structured way of how you can channel your grievance, and then it can be solved. Then maybe there'll be the first tier, maybe involving you, the chief, and the project. If it's not well sorted out, you will go to the next tier. Probably it will be somewhere higher up in the hierarchy, and all the way. Before it gets to the court, ESF, the international ESF, will try to ensure that your issues are sorted out in due course, and they're sorted out in a culturally appropriate way. So on pre-displacement measures, it's usually like when I gave that example of a bulldozer, you'll find I have a structure here. I'm a hawker. I'm selling on a roadside. I'm on a road reserve. Maybe I'll get a notice 6 months ago. Someone will come and tell me, hey, you're on a road reserve, you should move. And then they go. They will not come back again and again until maybe a time when I will wake up one day in the morning and find a bulldozer outside hitting my structure. But when it comes to ESF, international standards, these are usually laid out procedures that before you go to someone, before you do anything, you must give them a cutoff date. Tell them, we are coming to value your structures and we will pay you for this. But we are telling you from today henceforth, don't build any more structures because we will not pay for them. They will also come and try and establish a social baseline to try and also understand, are you the owner of this structure? Are you when did you build this structure? They will also try to get some information about your household demography, try and understand you, where you came from and how best they can offer you assistance. They will also do vulnerability identification. They try to assess whether you've had an external shock in the last few months and whether you'll be able to move out. But for the ones at national level, it's usually not clearly defined. So there's monitoring and evaluation. For the national, it's limited or ad hoc, but when it comes to the international standards, they usually some key indicators and KPIs to track during the implementation. It's usually not rigid. It spells out the indicators, and if things are not going the correct way, then there are ways, suggestions on how that can be improved are usually incorporated, and it's done. And even when it comes to monitoring, these people that you're telling to move to make way for the projects to happen, for the community projects to happen, after 1 year when they move and you do a monitoring and evaluation for them, how is their life? Have they progressed? If they haven't progressed, then the bridging action for this is usually you give them additional assistance. So whether it will be more farm inputs for them to try and boost their income or something, but there are key indicators that are usually looked at and they usually help in ensuring that these people bounce back to their normal place, if not better. So also issues to do with the gender-based violence and harassment risks. Under the national frameworks, most of these compensations were usually paid to the head of household. And to the head of household, it means the man. But when you come to the international frameworks, they are usually associated, there are principles associated with women. And to ensure that you avoid all these GBVH risks, when it comes to payment, the best practice is you pay the man and the woman together. If they don't want to get paid together, you do equal payments of that amount together, because these lives, they've built them together. And some of these men, when they are paid, they don't rebuild their lives become worse. So what we try to do is to ensure that the principles associated with women, you ensure that even the men know when you're doing these FGDs, you tell them that the amount will be paid equally. If you don't want equally, you have to open a bank account, and both of you must have access to it. And during these sessions, we will even try to educate, to tell the women that ensure when your husband is going to buy for an iron roof, make sure you are there. When something else is being planned, make sure you are there and your voice is heard. Because if you don't use well this amount, your life will be worse. And most men at this point is where they remember they hadn't completely finished paying their dowry, and they say, oh, now I have this amount of money, so now I'm thinking I will first go and finish the dowry payments or even get a new wife. So these are some of the issues that we usually face when we are talking about the national frameworks and the ESF, the international ESF. So when we go to the next slide, it's a mainstreaming process. So When we want to incorporate this ESF, we must first do the screening. We have to identify all these risks that are there at the onset of the project to ensure that we optimize on site locations. And an example I can give here is maybe when a project maybe to deal with energy, wind power generation is being done, you will find there are those specific points that will have those turbine generators. So a good project is one that has minimal impacts to these receptors. We call them receptors. The receptors will be like the households that will be next to that. So a good project is one that usually has none, or if it has, they are minimal. So what you want to do at this point is to ensure that you optimize on your site locations. Go to places where you will have minimal disruptions to the lives of people. And by you doing that, by incorporating that into the early project development phase, it ensures that you minimize and you apply even what we call the GIIP, the good industry practice. Then there is the assessment. So the assessment part is where you conduct the ESI. You look at things that will be impacted. We are talking about biodiversity here. We, like in one project where we were doing an ENS screening for a floating solar. This floating solar, most people will say, oh, they are just going to be panels that will be put on top of a dam. But it's not just panels on top of a dam. Remember, below the water, there is life. There are fish who have breeding spots on that dam. There are also hippopotamus over there. There are also migratory routes of land animals that also come to drink on that dam. So it's assessing a wide range of impacts that will be there and coming up with a good plan on how you're going to mitigate this. And if not, on how you're going to avoid them, and if not avoid, mitigate them to ensure that you don't impact on the environment negatively. So there's also the monitoring and reporting aspect of it. Ensure that you involve the community. The community, by doing this participatory mapping, the community knows places where sensitive things are and how best you can avoid also being negatively impacting the environment. So then there's adaptive learning. This is where you adjust based on the feedback you receive to ensure that to improve on the performance of the project over time. So I'd like to maybe show this example. I remember I talked about this maybe in a few slides back. So this was an example of one, we were doing a resettlement action plan for a project. It's a solar project. And these are some of this is one of the structure of one of the PAP who was identified and they had to relocate. So before we did the implementation, we had a training with the government valuers and we took them into one room. There were 4, and we gave them this photo because we had done a scoping before the RAP. So when we told them to do evaluation for this structure, the way you see it, you can see iron sheets are not okay. The roof, there is a hole on the wall. In fact, in the door, when you look at it, there is also a hole down there. And when we told them to give us a value of this one structure, we had 4 different answers. It is not that they were wrong. The answers were right, depending on the methodology they used. But the value they gave was based on the market price. And for us, we were not looking at the market price. We were looking at a full replacement cost. So when we asked them to do this at a full replacement cost, the value they got for this particular structure was twice what the person who had the lowest number had. So that shows you the difference of you using the international ESF to give a project affected person a good value for their structure rather than under the national frameworks. This is another example of land that I would like to share. So when you look, I want us to look at this top arrow first. So this, let me try and move this. I don't know whether it's affecting the view. Okay. So when you look at this top arrow, we said when we do land surveys, we ensure that the project affected persons are paid for the correct value of their land and for the whole, the area of course that is affected. But now when it comes to something we call orphan land assessments, assuming this is where this project will be done on this inner boundary, all these persons will be here who have a parcel inside here somewhere. All of them will be paid full value of their parcels. But now when it comes to people like this person, if it's in terms of percentage, how much they are affected, probably that's like maybe 10%, 5 to 10%. And if they are paid only for this person will not have an issue. But then when we look at this person down here, it's that 10% that is pending, that is not affected, but they will be paid for this other area. So in most of these projects, they don't do something we call orphan land assessments. This person, if they move from here, it means they will leave a small piece of their parcel behind. There will be so many fragmented pieces left along this side, and they will not be benefiting the project affected person. So what the international ESF does is to consider all these orphan land assessments and incorporate them into the compensation of the project affected person. So this is just one example. Then we go to livelihood restoration measures. For this particular project, we had done assessments of, we had 118 households. There's a difference between project affected households and project affected persons. So the project affected households were 118, but the project affected persons were about 500, because this is counting each and every person in that household, and we call them a PAP because they are affected. So when we were doing this livelihood restoration measures, and we did community engagements, and we asked the community, because you are moving from this place, the project will want to support your livelihood restoration. So what do you think are the best ways on how the project can do that? So they said they would like farm inputs, they would like assistance with modern techniques of farming, and so on. So what we did, we came up with a list of all the inputs that are usually, that will fall within that period, that season. That will be millet, will be maize, will be green grams. And we noted all that down, and we told them this is what we will do. We also looked at farm in the tools. They said they would like a jembe. A jembe is like a machete. A panga is like a machete. They would like a panga, they would like a jembe. And then they will also like a spray bottle, a spray bottle to spray the crops with fertilizer, with chemicals to ensure that pests and diseases are kept at bay. And then the other thing they said, because they are going to new lands, and those new lands have never been plowed, they would like assistance with a farm tractor. So what we did as people who are assisting with the resettlement action plan, we drew up a plan, and we looked at, because these households vary. There is one household that has 5 members, another household has 22 members because a husband has 2 wives, and another one, the numbers are fluctuating in between. So how best do we come up with a plan on how we can give these inputs? We looked at the national household survey that was done, and the average household number was 5.3. So what we did, we rounded that number up to 6. And so we said for each and every household that has a number of pups that gets to 6, this is what you will get. If it's more, then we added that number. And then for each and every 6, we gave a spray bottle, and we also gave gumboots. We also gave the jembes, the tools to assist with farming. But also, maybe I should be playing this as I continue explaining. So, looking at it from a different angle, you can say that is good that you're giving them these things to restore their lives. But like I mentioned when I start, before you do anything to a community, you must do a risk assessment. And risk assessment basically ensures that you look at all the things that could go wrong and you try and mitigate them to ensure that the project goes on well, avoids delays, and you're in good standing. And a good, let me also play this other one here. I don't know whether they can play both of them together. So by doing risk assessment for anything, for any activity that you want to do in a community, remember, not everyone knows what you want to do. Some of these people, they've never used a fertilizer, they've never used DAP, they've never used the spray bottle. It's the first time they'll be using. They've never stored these chemicals. How will they store them? So these are things that you have to do before you implement this. And that takes us to, sorry, I think I have to stop playing so that I can go to next. And that takes us to our next slide for risk assessment. When you're doing these things to the community, ensure that you identify that source of risk. Low seed fertility, what could be causing that? Poor storage, mold, pests and diseases. Come up with mitigation measures that are going to ensure that you improve on that. If it's providing technical guidance on storage, do that. If it's exploring somewhere central where the community can be putting their farm inputs, and then you have some sort of a register. If this family picks up 1 kilo of green grams or 1 kilo of what, record that. That is fine, provided you mitigate that issue. Because there's no need of you giving seed inputs to a community, and then much later they tell you their yields are 0, and it's because of issues that you could have mitigated. I mean, adding an extra cost to ensure that you meet your goal, it's completely fine, instead of using all that amount and then your yields are 0. So you look at things like pests and diseases. You will look at things like failure of rains. The seeds we gave them here were drought resistant, and we timed these LRP measures during their long rain season. So we gave them before they prepared the land, and then they did the planting. So there's also the risk of theft. Not everyone is your brother. So that one also has to be looked at. And then there is exclusion of women in some of these male-dominated roles. So this is part of when you're looking at ensuring you come up with an inclusive measure. You must ensure that these are the special interest groups. You also look at them. You see how best you can improve. So up to that point, I'd like to take any clarifications or questions, or because of time, I see time has gone. Should I just complete and then I get the questions later?
Yes, I think there's only a few slides left, right? So I think maybe just finish up with your lessons learned and so on, and then we can look at the questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
So for practical approaches, it's advisable for ESF, you embed it during the project design and the feasibility studies. Remember, you want all these aspects to be part of the project, not to be things that will be considered as separate from the project, because that way there won't be any benefits that can be factored in before the financial proposals and all that. So ensure that there is meaningful stakeholder engagement. So this is where you will identify all your stakeholders. Ensure that you look at their inputs. You'll have that criteria of the impact they can have to your project, and ensure you engage them appropriately. Strengthen the local capacity. This is where you will do a lot of capacity building, training institutions, staff, promote participatory and monitoring and reporting. So challenges of mainstreaming ESF. The one I think it's the most common is the first one, community awareness. No one in the community understands this. I'm sure when I go and tell them that, oh, this project is being funded by World Bank, oh, this project is being funded by IFD or AFDB, no one understands the entitlements. They just know it's a bank, but no one understands entitlement. But when these projects come, they usually adhere to the ESF, the international frameworks. So community awareness is usually lacking. The next one is the conflict between the development goals and the cultural norms. Like I mentioned, for the national frameworks, they would want to do everything at a least cost. If they say we are making a road this way, they don't want to care what biodiversity is there. They don't want to care whether they'll cut down on trees. They just want to pass. So those are some of the challenges, the conflict between the development goals and some of these cultural norms. So there is weak institutional capacities for safeguards and follow-ups. There is inadequate GRM mechanisms, as I had mentioned. The resource and funding constraints for these activities. And then there is usually some fragmented coordination among the agencies and stakeholders. And I think I'll mention this in the next point. So lessons learned, early engagement will prevent resistance and build ownership for these community projects. Respecting cultural values will strengthen trust and acceptance. So inclusivity of the special interest and vulnerable groups ensures fairness and legitimacy of the project. Safeguarding adds value beyond compliance by enhancing project quality and sustainability. Transparent communication reduces the conflicts and improves accountability. So recommendations is to embed ESF in community projects to ensure that local institutions local institutions that are dealing with safeguard issues, whether it's environmental or social, are strengthened. To promote the climate smart development, use data-driven tools, foster community-led monitoring, and then the need for ENS specialists to get involved in these projects from the design, from the project design phase. Thank you for listening to me. And I'll finish by saying that safeguards are not barriers, but bridges to building trust, equity, and sustainable impacts for the community. Thank you very much, everyone, and I am open for clarifications or comments.
Thank you, Teddy. Wow, that was so interesting. Can we give him a round of applause? Maybe if you can stop sharing, there you go, then we can see people's faces and hands clapping. There you go, look at that. Very wonderful. Yes, lots of interesting comments and questions in the chat. Let me just go up to the first one. Mario was saying he understands that this framework is used for the assessment of community development and to suggest different national policies. How do you bridge this?
Thank you, Mario. You want me to take this, or I note them down?
Just say that the next part of his question was, what is the commitment of governments to this ES framework in order for them to respect the values and the ES issues in development operations? Maybe let's look at Mario's questions, and then I'll tell you the next ones.
Okay. Thank you, Mario, for your question. So starting with how we bridge this, when I was showing that the gap, when I was doing the gap analysis, when I was presenting it, we usually put the national frameworks first and then the international framework second. and then we do a gap analysis. That was the third option that I had there. So these are ways of how we can bridge. So looking at it from, maybe let me just give you by one example. At the national level, if you want to compensate the communities, you want to pay for a structure, you are paying the structure at market value. But for the international framework, you are paying them at full replacement cost. So what is the bridging measure? What we do, we take the approval that has been done by the chief government valuer, and we note amount X. And then we do an assessment of our own of what that structure could be, because we usually have licensed valuers, and we do its amount Y. Then in the bridging gap, we say, now we run that whole formula for everyone. And then we say person A is supposed to be paid Y so that this project can be compliant with the international ESF. But what has been approved by the government is X. So the bridging gap will be to minus Y and X, and then that amount is usually what is in the general funding funding platform of the project. So you will hear these DFIs will say we are funding 10 billion, but probably 2 billion from that amount is to offset some of those small issues that have been identified by the ENS consultants. So that was the first one. Then the second one is commitments by governments. So is that okay, Mario? Are you satisfied with the answer?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the example.
So when it comes to commitments by governments, there is something called a CP, a condition precedent. So if these projects want to get amount X from the DFI, they usually sign an agreement that says they will adhere to every single thing that will be highlighted by the independent auditor in terms of compliance to environmental and social risks. So if it's in terms of biodiversity and measures that have been proposed to ensure that everything is mitigated, there will be a budget that will be put for that. So before they get amount X, they have to demonstrate that they are willing and they are ready to fund A and B for them to get the amount X that they want. And it's usually done beforehand. It's not that they are given money and then they do no. So most of these projects you'll find they are told to do due diligence, do the ENS due diligence, identify issues. Once you identify issues and you know this is what the issues are, then you start active process towards that. Maybe it will be funded directly from the DFI, or maybe they'll look for money to fund that, but that has to be done before it kicks off.
So you make it as a starting point condition, right?
Yes, it's a CP, a condition. Yes, it's a condition that has to be done before you go to the next step.
And just to, how do you control that? Who controls it? Because I'm thinking about our government's usually ability to, to slide down over or just change the rules. How is it controlled or not?
So in our case, we are consultants. So what happens is that the DFI identifies that they want to fund a particular project, and they do a TOR, and they request for consultants who can come and do environmental and social due diligence. So once these consultants come, they will do an assessment of everything and then give the recommendations to the DFI themselves. At this point, they are employed by the DFIs. So the DFIs will go back to the governments and tell them, this is what was identified and this has to be done. And for it to be done, an independent person has to be controlling that process, because with the government processes, and I already mentioned that if they're giving amount X and we've identified they're supposed to give amount Y, if the government is allowed to pay X first before the Y, then there is an issue first that can be identified to corruption issues, because if this person moves and they don't get the Y, how will you trace them? And most of them don't have mobile phones, they live in rural areas. So these all become issues, ethical issues as well. So the consultant identifies all these, does a good engagement with the communities, collects all the needed data, if it's bank details, all that, and then everything is done once. Also to ensure that they don't stop their lives for long, because before X and Y can be approved, could be easily 6 months or even a year. There is no way you expect someone, I pay you 1,000 shillings, I tell you keep that in your account, wait for another 1,000, which I will give you at the end of the year. Idle money will always find something to do. They will go do something else, and then you will find them there 1 year later. So that's how it's usually controlled from the DFI point. And all the projects I've been involved in, that's what we've done, and we've had a good success rate.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for those interesting questions, Mario. Another one from Judith is asking, how do the communities respond to this framework? How do you introduce it initially into communities? Are they responsive? Are they receptive? How does it work from the community point of view?
Yes. So when we start the engagements with the community, they are very receptive. They see this as most of them look at it as a better way to bettering their lives, because what they are used to, when we start telling them what they are entitled to, they see this as something of a miracle. But it's not a miracle. It's something that they are entitled to, and it has to be done to them. So all these communities are usually receptive and to what we tell them, and to these proposals of them getting these additional assistance.
Thank you. And then Anna Grace, I think linked to that question, says, I would like to know how you made this tool useful to the community. And you've explained that obviously for them, it's an advancement of their conditions and their situation and so on. But for the government as well, how do they see it as something positive that they should support?
At that point, the government has to see it as something positive, because they want to develop the country. And for them to develop the country, they have to adhere to the terms and conditions that have been put up. So they may not willingly agree to everything that is being done, because when you look at, if I come and start telling you that 1 year later after I moved you to a particular place, and I find you're not doing well, and I come tell you, hey, Janine, I'd like to give you, after our assessments, we've noticed that your life is not progressing well, and we would like at least to boost you a little by giving you some inputs, maybe like seeds, for you to at least boost your income this year. Some of them will not want that. In fact, like I mentioned, in terms of compensation, most governments want to do cash compensation and leave.
Yeah.
They don't want anything to deal with in-kind compensation. But as we insist, if they're giving you money and you see this money is not enough, please ask for in-kind compensation, because that is part of the international ESF. And it's a requirement that they have to do. If you ask, you have to be given. There is no going around about it. They have to do it.
Thank you. And then ARC says, how do you determine whether to consider project-affected households or project-affected people? Are there guiding principles? In which one do you go for?
A good question. Probably I will say what most of these projects that we've done, we've handled them at a community level, where projects are to be done in a particular village, in a particular area where there are families that are residing there. So we consider all of them as project affected persons. But when it comes to identification, you identify as members of one household, which is also an acceptable way of recognizing them. You recognize them as households, and then now trickling down from the households, for like that assessment I gave about giving LRP inputs, the livelihood restoration measures input. The number of was very helpful to guide us on what we will give to what household. So that's what I can say.
Okay, thank you. And post-project, how is ESF used after project? Is there any kind of follow-up mentoring or visits or ways of assessing the impact?
Yes, there's usually the monitoring and evaluations that usually happen. So after, like when livelihood restoration plans are happening, probably it's during project construction, or maybe the project has already kicked off. So you'll find these people have already moved and you're giving them inputs, and you will monitor them that year and even the following year. And also we have NGOs that are usually very helpful in monitoring things, especially to deal with biodiversity. We'll monitor an example for a wind farm project that we did. We had identified that there are some migratory species of bird that come. And also there was a local bird that was hovering around the area a lot. So what we will do there's a CLO that was allocated every single day. They will go around checking to see if there are impacts, bad impacts. So they will go around the wind turbines and check to see whether there are feathers or whether there is a bird that has been hit by the turbine. And then after that, additional measures can be looked at, because if a bird usually flies this way at 8 a.m., a turbine can be shut down at 8 a.m. to allow that particular bird to pass at 8 a.m. Then probably at maybe 8:30 or 9, the turbine can be switched back on. So those are some of the additional measures that usually happen even after the project has kicked off and it's ongoing. And it's usually towards the lifespan of the project. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm an avid birder myself. So when you talked about how you look after the birds, even I was like, that's just beautiful. How I know we keeping an eye on the time, but my question would be, how extensive is this framework in like across Africa? Because if I think back, I wish I'd known about this 40 years ago when I started my first community project, was with a community of people that were displaced to make way for a sugar estate. And the way the people were treated was absolutely horrible. And so I was dealing with this community of broken people, men who had to leave the area to go and look for work elsewhere because there was just nothing left. No water, no infrastructure. They really were just dumped in this arid, dry area. And so, you know, the ramifications and all the negative environmental and social impacts of that kind of a displacement were so difficult to deal with. And it made me wish I could have known about this framework 40 years ago. So how extensive is it across Africa or even globally?
I will say, from what I have experienced, it's widely being used, especially for projects that are capital intensive. For small projects, I've seen the government is still bulldozing its way through. But for projects that are capital intensive, that are putting countries on the map, because of, like in Kenya, there is the Lake Turkana wind power, which is the largest wind farm in Africa in terms of turbines installed. When you look at Tanzania, there is the solar farm, the 150 megawatt solar farm. So these are big projects that are putting the countries on the map. So these are some of the projects that are using the ESF. But for the small projects, it's not, they're not utilizing the international ESF. Yeah.
Well, I hope it does spread, because it really makes so much sense, you know, when you look at the impact and you know, the way that it mitigates all those kind of risks and so on. It's just, it makes so much sense to be doing that as a matter of course. Yeah. I saw a hand. Was it Cheryl? Yes, Sherry. Just unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
It's already 5:23 p.m. here in the Philippines. I'm sorry. My question is, how can the principles of environmental and social framework be meaningfully localized, especially here in the Philippine context, where communities often face the dual challenge, especially the poverty and environmental degradation, without compromising either the social equity or the ecological sustainability? That's all.
Okay. Yes. So if I got you correct, what environmental what frameworks are you utilizing? Is it the national or the international frameworks?
The national, sir.
The national frameworks. So my take on this will be, and I think I mentioned during Mario's question, on looking at these gaps, where these gaps are coming up. If you're looking at it in terms of the poverty and you don't want to compromise on something else, maybe you have to like note down all those risks. You do like a risk assessment and you start by looking at it. So what is causing the issues with poverty? And see how best you can come up with a bridging gap. A bridging gap doesn't mean that you forsake the national frameworks or whatever framework you're aiming to look at, but it just means that you try and make it better. So if it's looking at things in terms of maybe additional assistance like food baskets or something like that, maybe just come up with a third layer of bridging the gaps. That's what I will say. If I got you, if I've managed to answer your question correctly.
I think Murigi has to buy himself an air ticket to the Philippines and go there and do some,
yeah,
do
seems
some
like
work
so.
with
Seems
Terry.
like so.
Yeah,
that's what
actually, because there are poor areas here, especially in the southern part.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent. And Mario also wanted to know, do you have anything written down, like case studies or articles or reports that you can share, or a website you can share where we can find some more information about your work?
Yes. So what we'll do, I'll share links to some of these resettlement action plans, the ones we've implemented across Africa. We've implemented in Nigeria, in Tanzania, in Kenya, and I'll share them, and you'll be able to even see what I was presenting in more detail, because it will give you, it will show you where, at what point we came in and how we left, and at the point of us leaving, how we left the community. So yeah, that is good. I'll share the links and then I'll share them with Jessica, and then Jessica will share.
Then she can share. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Teddy.
You,
that
Mwangi.
really has been so informative and yeah, very, very interesting for us to learn some more and to see how we can make this part of our work. I think it would be beneficial to all of us in all parts of the world. So just a call, you can see how well Murigi has done, hey, as a IACD member. He's come and shared his knowledge and his passion on this platform, and we invite you to do the same. We have so much that we can share amongst each other. So all of you are doing such incredible work, and we would love to hear about it. So, please get in touch with us, get in touch with Daniel, with Jessica, or myself, and put forward an option and say, I'd like to talk about this. So coming up, we have on the 12th of November is our last session for this year, and it's an open forum where we just review what we've covered over the year, think about how could we improve things, what else could we do in these webinars, and possibly start fleshing out a schedule for next year. So that'll be on the 12th of November. And then the first one for 2026 will be the 11th of February, where somebody is presenting on community leadership skills. So that will kick us off for next year. And then Jessica has put in a notification about the 23rd of October, the Community Development Researchers Forum meeting, which is another IACD group. You're welcome to look at that one and get yourselves a ticket on that link. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Murigi. Thank you for your very, very interesting presentation. Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, Jessica, for being there and keeping everything going. And I wish you all well. Thank you for all the different topics we've had this year. And let's get together on the 12th of November and just review and see what we can do to make this even better. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon, evening, night, whatever it is for you. Cheers.
Thank you so much, and all the best.